All right. Good evening, Houston. Good evening to our viewers joining us locally, nationally, and internationally. My name is Steve Okoroha, and on behalf of Afrovibes TV and Radio Station, I welcome you to the official Texas 18th Congressional District Runoff Debate. Tonight's debate is streaming live on Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, the Afrovibes mobile app, Afrovibes.tv, and our official YouTube channel. Thank you for choosing to be part of this civic moment. Texas 18th Congressional District carries a powerful history and a profound legacy. More than 800,000 residents rely on strong, clear, principled leadership. Tonight, the two candidates seeking to represent this district will present their vision, their plans, and their solutions. Before we begin, it is my pleasure to introduce my co-moderator, the talented broadcast host of Afrovibes TV, Justice Ojo.
Thank you, Steve. I am honored to join you tonight and to help guide this important conversation for the voters of Texas 18. Throughout the evening, Steve and I will alternate questions covering every major issue affecting this district: the economy, public safety, healthcare, the environment, education, immigration, and more. Each candidate will have equal time to answer and rebut. We ask the candidates to respect time limits and maintain a respectful, solutions-focused discussion. Let us begin with opening statements.
All right, so each candidate will now have 3 minutes for an opening statement. We begin with Ms. Edwards.
Good evening. My name is Amanda Edwards, and I'm a former at-large Houston City Council member. I am running to be the next Congresswoman for the 18th Congressional District because I believe we must create a community where every single person in it, no matter what their background, no matter where they live, has the opportunity not just to get by day to day, but to truly thrive each and every single day. And right now, our nation is experiencing a battle of a lifetime. Never in my lifetime have I seen a president that didn't believe in the rule of law, who's fought against healthcare, education, and economic stability in the way that this president has. So we need someone who is going to be bold and able to fight for what's right, no matter what the consequences are. But at the very same time, we need someone who has the experience, the vision, the commitment to the community to truly be able to deliver the results that our community is looking for and that it deserves. I'm no stranger to this district. I was born and raised, and I still live in this 18th Congressional District to this day, and it's personal to me that we get this right. And when I was growing up, one of the things that really shaped my drive to serve people rather than just politics happened to be my own father's illness. When I was about 10 years old, he was diagnosed with something called multiple myeloma, which is an aggressive form of cancer that took his life when I was a teen. And when I asked my dad what would happen if the health insurance, what if they said no to his life-saving treatments? My dad would just look at me and say, well, we'd have to figure something else out. And I knew then, just like I know today, that's the wrong answer. We need systems in place that save lives, systems in place that don't leave people to their own devices. And so that is why I'm running to be the next Congresswoman. We need someone who's going to have the experience. Not only have I worked in the 18th Congressional District office, I have served as an at-large city council member and have a background with public finance and bringing public dollars to public projects, all of which are part of the role of being the congressional leader that our community needs. So this election is very important. We have gone without our vote for far too long, and I look forward to the opportunity to be elected to serve as the next Congresswoman.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. And now we will hear from Mr. Menefee.
Hey everybody, I'm Christian Menefee, and I'm running for Congress because it was a thoughtful, a helpful, a compassionate government that gave me my first shot at the American dream. When I was growing up, there were many nights I would not have eaten were it not for the WIC program. There were many days I would have been at school on an empty stomach were it not for free lunch in our public schools. And shout out to Wonderlick and Klein Forest High School, both in the district that I went to. My parents would have never purchased their first home were it not for VA down payment assistance that allowed them to put just $500 down when I was in high school. And that's how we got our first house. I would have never been the first in my family to go to college were it not for a Pell Grant, and my brother almost certainly would have died from childhood cancer were it not for my parents' military health insurance that fully funded his bone marrow transplant, and he's been in remission for more than 20 years. At every single step, it was a thoughtful, a helpful, a compassionate government that gave me my first shot at the American dream. And that's how you take a family like mine that had sent more people to prison than to college to me being elected as the youngest person and the first African American to serve as the Harris County Attorney. So when I look into the eyes of my two young sons, and I look at what's going on right now in Washington, D.C., I worry about the America that we're leaving for the next generation. Right now, we have a president who is targeting all folks who don't agree with him, but especially people who have skin color like mine. We got a president that when planes fall out of the sky, he's blaming DEI. We all know that that's code for black folks. We got a president who is slashing budgets for black-owned businesses so they don't have an opportunity to get their fair share of government contracts. We have a president who is time and time again demonizing black and brown folks throughout this country, leaving us with no opportunity to have our shot at the American dream. So what we need to do is send someone to Congress who's going to be a fighter and is going to stand up to this president in this weak Republican majority in Congress every single day. And the good news is that's what I've done as the Harris County Attorney. I took over that office of 300 people at just 32 years old, and we transformed that office into a fighting force that stood up for the rights of Houstonians, of people in this district every single day. When Ken Paxton came out to Harris County and tried to get more than 2,000 legally cast ballots, these are our votes, thrown out, I took him to court, beat him, and every single one of those votes was counted. When Donald Trump cut $20 million in healthcare programming right here in Harris County, I took him to court, beat him, and every single dollar was restored. We're going to have to send somebody up to Congress who's prepared to have that fight, and I will have that fight each and every day. But I also want to make the 18th one of the best places to live and raise a family in all of the state of Texas. And right now we see that prices are high, that people aren't being paid enough, that Texas is the highest number of uninsured folks of any state in the entire country. And I want to change that. I want to raise the minimum
10
wage.
seconds.
I want universal health care for everyone. And I want an America where everybody has a chance to succeed. I look forward to the conversation tonight. Christian Menefee, running for the 18th Congressional District.
All right. Thank you both very much. And now we will begin tonight's questions. First topic is vision, values, and leadership. Texas' 18th Congressional District is evolving economically, culturally, and generationally. Voters want to know not only what you believe, but what will actually change under your leadership. What is the single most urgent shift Texas 18 needs from its next member of Congress? And how will voters measure whether you fulfilled that promise in your first term? We'll start with Ms. Edwards.
I mentioned earlier in my opening remarks about my father's illness and him being diagnosed with multiple myeloma when I was 10 years old. And it was then where I really began to appreciate that real lives hang in the balance of the decisions we make or choose not to make, or the systems we create or choose not to create. And in this case, there are millions of people in our community right now who are watching healthcare become a political chip in a broader game of politics. And that is wrong. Not only should we be about the business of providing access to subsidies for the Affordable Care Act, but we need to fix the Affordable Care Act so that it actually covers the things that most people want and need when it comes to having healthcare coverage. In addition to that, prescription drug costs. You know, I had talked to seniors that have literally had to make decisions about rationing their prescription drugs and taking their prescription in the morning and rationing it out, and then in their evening time taking something over the counter because they can't pay their bills and their prescription. That is wrong. And we finally got to a space and place where prescription drug costs were being addressed under the Biden administration. But of course, the Trump administration wants to take us several steps backwards. We've got to have a fighter who has solutions and is ready to prepare to address this issue. Finally, with regard to Black health equity. One of the things that is most striking is that Harris County is one of the highest, the highest levels of Black maternal deaths in the nation. That is unacceptable, particularly since we are home to the world's largest medical center. So I also support bringing in the dollars, the resources, and the plans necessary so that we can reduce the disparities that our communities face when they're trying to access healthcare.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Mr. Menefee, same question.
The number one issue for me is affordability. putting more money in people's pockets. Since 1978, the average worker has seen their wages increase only 18%. But in that same time period, the average CEO of a large corporation has seen their total compensation balloon over 1,300%. We have a country right now where we're doing more for the wealthy, the ultra wealthy, than we're doing for the average person. There used to be a time in this country where you could get the house, the 2 cars, you could send your kids off to do better than you did, and you could retire at a reasonable age with dignity. But now we have so many folks who don't have money in their bank account, who can't afford to send their kids to school, and who are having to retire later and later. My #1 goal is to put more money back in the pockets of the people who live in the 18th Congressional District. That means increasing the minimum wage. In 2007, when I was fresh out of high school, I was working at H-E-B Grocery, pushing carts and bagging groceries, and I was making only $7.25 an hour. There are still people in this country today, in 2026, who are only making $7.25 an hour. That's wrong. I want to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Right now, we have a huge number of people in this state who are uninsured, and we see many times people have to choose between keeping the lights on and getting life-saving treatment. That isn't right. That's why I want guaranteed health care for every single person in this country. But also, folks are working hard to be able to try to buy homes, and they can't afford them because they're getting priced out of every single market. Our former Vice President Kamala Harris pushed down payment assistance. That's something I want to support as well, making sure that we're putting money into people's pockets so that they can buy a home one day. And then lastly, we have to increase the number of tax credits we have for the average working class person. Right now, there are people out in our community who paid less in taxes over the past 5 or 6 years than billionaires did. That's not right. That's not a system that's working for the middle class, and I'm going to work as hard as I can to change that in Congress.
All right, thank you, Mr. Menefee.
This district holds a legacy of national civil rights leadership, yet inequality remains deeply rooted. Modern leadership demands both honoring tradition and innovating forward. How will your leadership style honor this district's civil rights legacy while modernizing outdated systems that continue to hold the district back? Ms. Edwards?
You know, we have experienced quite a bit of loss in this 18th Congressional District in a short period of time, and I want to acknowledge that. We've lost both Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee and Congressman Sylvester Turner within less than 1 year of each other. But what we know about this 18th Congressional District is that we are strong and resilient, and we stand on the shoulders of great leaders like Barbara Jordan and Mickey Leland and Craig Washington, Sheila Jackson Lee, and Sylvester Turner, all of whom who fought for people and for justice. We are now having to embark upon the next leg of this journey. And this is a journey that we are on in a collective sense. And we've got to put someone in place that is unafraid to fight for what's right, no matter what the consequences are. But at the very same time, someone who can deliver the results and not just put up a fight, but also deliver for the community. When it comes to civil rights, when it comes to the attack on our democracy, when it comes to attack on our voting rights, right now, we have yet to see the John Lewis Voting Rights Act to pass. And yet and still, we have been home. In fact, we were listed in the Department of Justice letter to racially gerrymander this very district. That is wrong. We need protections like pre-clearance. We need protections in place that restore and increase voting rights rather than strip them away. We are at a dangerous time where the things that we have always fought for, education, healthcare, civil rights, are now on the chopping block. And we need to put a leader in place who has the experience to deliver when it comes to bringing back what we've lost, but also forging a path for our future. We can do both and. It's not good enough just to go back to where we were. We have to achieve our full potential as a community.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Mr. Menefee, same question.
A federal judge ruled that Republicans had changed voting laws in a way that, and this is a direct quote, surgically targeted African Americans. This wasn't in the 1960s, this was in 2016, right here in the South. The same fights that we have had to protect our voting rights throughout the history of the civil rights movement are going on right now in this country. And we need to be sending fighters to Congress who are going to be on the front lines of trying to protect our voting rights. The good news is I've done that exact work as the Harris County attorney. As the county attorney, when Ken Paxton came out and tried to throw out more than 2,000 legally cast ballots, I fought him all the way up to the Texas Supreme Court, and every single vote was counted. When Governor Abbott and other state leaders targeted our Harris County clerk, Tanisha Hudspeth, a black woman who was phenomenal at her job, I stood in defense and protection of her each and every time. That's why voters know that when I go to Congress, you can trust that I'm going to work as hard as I can to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act so that folks can have 24-hour voting and online voter registration, and we take away the vestiges of racism and blocking people from access to the polling site in this country. But I'm proud to say that even when there were more than 20 people in this race, I was the first candidate to stand up and say publicly that I support reparations for descendants of slaves. There are folks who built this country and never received any type of financial payment for it. It's wrong, and they should be compensated. Their descendants should be compensated. This is a district that has a very deep legacy of sending fighters to Congress. And two of those fighters are former Representative Craig Washington and former Representative Erica Lee Carter. Both of those former members of the 18th Congressional District are supporting my campaign. They're supporting me because they know that I will fight, they know that I will be effective, and they know that I will get stuff done every single day on the civil rights front for the people who live in the 18th Congressional District.
Thank you, Mr. Menefee.
All right, now we're going to move on to our next topic of economy, jobs, and cost of living. Houston's economy is transitioning from energy to clean tech, from traditional medical industries to biotech, from logistics to automation. Many workers want clarity on where future jobs will come from. What top 3 federal tools will you secure to create and protect future-proof jobs for the residents of Texas 18? We'll start with Ms. Edwards.
While I was on City Council, I learned that Houston was ranked number 42 in the nation in venture capital investment, which meant, in other words, we couldn't keep a startup here to save our lives. And so I, of course, wasn't an expert in tech or innovation, but understood that my role in public office is to both solve challenges and to seize opportunities. And so we did just that. I started a task force for tech and innovation, and we asked the question, what needed to be done here in Houston to create a robust innovation economy of the future? And we came up with recommendations and strategies, including the creation of our innovation district. We went from $260 million in venture capital investment to over $2 billion in less than 5 years. We need someone in place who has done the work of building economic opportunity for our region. And with respect to the federal government, there are many ways in which we can help facilitate entrepreneurs to have more access to opportunity. Case in point, when I was on City Council, I also started the task force for women and minority small business owners because they were lacking capital access in a way that really was impeding their ability to grow and thrive. One of the things we recommended be done in that case and instance is to bring dollars into the hands of the small businesses that need the most, and that is women and minority small businesses. So instead of just having traditional bank loans, we need to be shipping dollars into the hands of what's known as CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions, that do lend to minority small businesses at greater rates. These are some of the things that are tools in the toolkit when you go to the federal government. In addition to that, you have community impact grants that we can also be investing in our community more directly. And of course, we will be supporting job training so that people are prepared for the jobs, not just of today, but for the future.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Mr. Menefee, same question.
As the next member of Congress from the 18th Congressional District, I'm going to be deeply focused on bringing jobs back specifically to the district here in the 18th. And I've done that exact work as Harris County Attorney. We were able to take on millions and millions of dollars from the federal government and create an apprenticeship program right here in Harris County. And the reason that's important is because with the influx of AI, the jobs that are going to be first to go are going to be the lower level white collar jobs. But so many folks out there know that we're seeing an extreme shortage of skilled labor, blue collar jobs. I'm talking plumbers, electricians, folks who work in marine life. We already know the data showed us that in 30 years, we're going to have extreme shortages in these types of jobs. So it's important that we train these folks now. We did that at Harris County. We brought on an apprenticeship program where we took federal dollars and we trained people to learn about working in the construction industry, in the public transportation industry, in the entertainment industry, jobs that folks can get in, stay in, work for 10 to 15 years, and make a fantastic living and take care of their family. But we also know that we have the world's largest medical hub right here in Houston, the Houston Medical Center. And it's going to be imperative that we have a member who is working hard to bring dollars back to that medical center so that we can increase the number of jobs there. But our member's also going to have to be an advocate to fight back against the Trump administration. And I've done that exact work with the medical center. We saw that Donald Trump cut billions and billions of dollars for medical research across this country. And I was proud to be a lawyer who filed a brief in that case, standing up to Donald Trump, saying you cannot strip our medical hub of our opportunity and its ability to bring in jobs here in our region. I'm going to do every single thing I can to build out the number of skilled labor jobs so that folks can learn to use their hands, make good money, and have their fair shot at the American dream again.
Thank you, Mr. Menefee.
Young adults in the district often struggle with underemployment or unstable gig work, despite the presence of strong trade programs, community colleges, and emerging tech sectors. How will you build reliable pipelines that move young adults into high-wage apprenticeships, trade careers, and technology pathways? Ms. Edwards?
Bringing the resources down is critical. You know, when you are in Congress, one of the things that you have opportunity to do is not just pass policy and not just pass or address constituent issues, but you also have the ability to bring home the bacon, as they say. In my background, I was a public finance attorney, and so I was bringing public dollars to public projects on a professional level. I also spent a great amount of time as an at-large Houston City Council member, bringing home billions of dollars to our region. And so part of the work that we will do is make sure that we are providing them with the tools necessary, including the resources. And in addition to that, we want to make sure, and the resources need to be going into training programs, making sure that people have access to training so that they can get the jobs that they are looking for and deserve. I will also add to this the notion that we also need to fix the Affordable Care Act because it is stifling people's desire to want to become entrepreneurs. When you have affordable health care, it needs to also cover what you need, and it needs to work for you. And right now, people are having to choose between staying with a W-2 employer because it has better health coverage, instead of going off and really advancing their skills forward as entrepreneurs and then in maybe other higher wage paying jobs. We need to put a stop to what's happening with regard to our health care being a political chip in a game, and make sure that the Affordable Care Act actually does work and is improved. I'll be committed to making sure that we have limited the barriers that exist today to economic opportunity for our entrepreneurs as well as our leaders of future business.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Mr. Menefee, same question.
As a member of Congress in the 18th, the way that I'm going to ensure that our young people are getting into pipeline programs is I'm going to connect them to the programs. Right now, there are dozens and dozens of pipeline programs that exist throughout our city, throughout our region. The problem is that there is no connection point between the students and the programs. Recent studies have shown that Houston has one of the highest in the entire country populations of 10 to 17-year-olds. And at the same time, we're seeing an extreme shortage in the type of skilled labor work that folks can get into, work in, and make enough money to care for their family. The problem is the jobs aren't being matched up with the students. And so we need a member who's going to, and I'll be that member, establish a hub that connects community college pipeline programs, apprenticeship programs for jobs, directly with the students at the high schools, at the community colleges, to ensure that they can take that next step and get directly into those programs. And it's about being imaginative. And I've done exactly that as the county attorney. I came into the county attorney's office and I created a program called the Summer Legal Academy. Because when I was coming up, I didn't know any lawyers except Jack McCoy on Law and Order, and I had no idea what it would take to become a lawyer and be able to get into that career field. We took students from across public schools throughout Harris County, and every summer we have a cohort of students. We teach them about applying to law school, about how to best do on the LSAT, about how to learn through the Socratic method, which is how folks are taught in law school. They get to meet lawyers who look like them, judges, and the best part of it is we pay them $15 an hour. These are the types of programs we need to ensure that our students are best positioned to be successful in the workforce and to get good jobs. Send me to Congress and I will ensure that we have connectivity between those programs and our students.
Thank you, Mr. Menefee.
Inflation has cooled nationally, But for many families in Texas 18, the price of food, rent, transportation, and healthcare remains a daily burden. Which cost of living pressure will you prioritize first? And what specific federal action will you introduce in your first 100 days to address it? Ms. Edwards, we'll start with you.
I mentioned this previously that my focus will be on healthcare. Healthcare touches each and every single one of us, whether we like it or not. And it is the most destabilizing aspect of one's life when, of course, things go awry. So my focus on healthcare will be to do the following. One, make sure that those subsidies to the Affordable Care Act are in fact in place and extended for a prolonged period so that access to the Affordable Care Act is affordable. Number two, make sure the Affordable Care Act actually works properly by way of increasing and expanding what the coverage is. And then, of course, making sure that people can have access to the providers they want and the services that they're looking for and that they deserve. In addition to that, we've got to make sure we're putting resources into making sure that health equity concerns are addressed. Our Black mothers should not be dying in childbirth or after because of the fact that we have such huge disparities when it comes to Black maternal deaths here in Harris County. We have to focus on that by supporting measures like the Momnibus bill that was sponsored by Lauren and Underwood, for example. We can then go about the business of trying to provide more solutions to this problem that has been deadly for us. In addition to that, and talking about women's health care, Texas is the most dangerous state in the country to be pregnant because our government and our state believes it is their job to come between a doctor and a woman's right to have women's reproductive health care choices. And that is wrong. We have to also intervene in that arena so that women are not afraid to be here, particularly if they have high-risk pregnancy, and of course, not know whether their doctor will allow them to die in a case of an emergency. And these are the issues that we're facing, and we have to have solutions for them. And I will as your next Congresswoman.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Mr. Menefee, same question.
The number one way I'm going to put money back into people's pockets as a member of Congress is to put money back into people's pockets as a member of Congress. And that's increasing tax credits for the middle class in this country. If you go read the tax code right now, there is loophole after loophole that allows large corporations, that allows billionaires to, in many instances, pay $0 in taxes. In what world should someone who has $1 billion in net worth be paying $0 in taxes? That is far less than so many folks sitting at home watching this are paying in taxes. So I want to do every single thing I can to increase the earned income tax credit, the child tax credit, to ensure that when folks are going through major changes in their life, they have more money directly in their pocket that they're able to spend on other things instead of giving it to the federal government. But I also want to help boost a tax credit for caregivers. In the state of Texas, 3.4 million people have to care for a loved one. And in most of those instances, they're having to come out of their pocket. Yet the government is not giving them any type of leeway. There's no reprieve. There's no money being put back in their pocket. I would create and expand a tax credit directly for caregivers in this country to ensure that this money is going to the middle class and not to the ultra wealthy. And so how do we pay for this? So many times people come and make promises about what they're going to do in Congress. How do you pay for it? A 3% surtax on people with more than a $50 million net worth could create trillions and trillions of dollars that will come back into the federal government that could be redistributed to people who are in the working class in this country and who are just trying to make ends meet. I think it is high time that we start standing up to the billionaires and the ultra wealthy class in this country who the government is allowing to get more rich and more rich while the rest of us are struggling. Send me to Congress and I will fight tooth and nail to increase the number of tax credits for working people and put money back in your pocket.
Thank you, Mr. Menefee.
This next topic is public safety and justice. Residents consistently express the need for both safer communities and better relationships between law enforcement and the neighborhoods they serve. Balancing the two remains a central challenge. How will you strengthen public safety while also improving trust between law enforcement and the community? Ms. Edwards?
You know, just in 2020, when we saw and witnessed the murder of George Floyd, there were so many promises and there was so much conversation and so much hope around what could be as it related to criminal justice reform and the issue of police brutality. Unfortunately, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act did not pass as was promised. And that is one item that I will fully support in its totality, because we need protections in place to make sure that the relationship between law enforcement and the community is productive, to make sure that it is a relationship predicated on the basis that we are serving and protecting all people and not vilifying one group as opposed to another. That's critical. In addition to that, we also need to make sure that we are putting into place the resources necessary so that we can have policies that make better sense. Community policing is something I talked about quite a bit while I was serving on city council, but urged us to remember that you cannot just talk about these policies without there being funding associated with that. That's why, from the federal government standpoint, you have the opportunity to send down to localities the resources necessary so that they can, in fact, implement and utilize effective community policing models. That means you go in a neighborhood, and instead of harassing every person you see because you don't know who's who, you have the opportunity to know who's Ms. Johnson's grandson as opposed to someone who has come to do Ms. Johnson harm. And that only comes about when you have presence and you've been engaged and you have relationships formed in the community because you have that presence. So that is something that I will support, in addition to making sure we provide after-school training opportunities as well.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Mr. Menefee, same question.
The way you balance public safety and holding police officers accountable in this country is to allow police officers to focus on violent crime and to ensure that we're investing in our communities so that the violent crime is the only thing that police officers are focused on. Here in Harris County, we expanded a mental health diversion program, a program that allowed for mental health interrupters to come to certain situations instead of sending police officers out there, because there are many instances where a police officer will come to a scene, there's been no violent threat or violent crime alleged, and there's an escalation that leads to a member of our community being harmed, and nobody wants that. So to the extent we can take mental health calls off of law enforcement and instead give it to mental health professionals who are trained to deal with people in crises, that is something that I would deeply support. But I also want to increase funding for our law enforcement officers to be able to go after human trafficking. Houston is the human trafficking hub of our country. So many folks are trafficked right here through this city. It is imperative that law enforcement is properly funded to be able to go after traffickers who are targeting young boys and girls in our communities. But lastly, it's about holding police officers accountable when they do wrong by our communities. Now, I fully support community policing, and I believe that police officers, in fact, should be living in the communities that they're policing so that they get to know the people who are there. But when wrong is done, folks must be held accountable. We need a national database in this country that ensures that if a police officer leaves one department because of misconduct and because of harming a member of the community wrongly, that officer shouldn't be able to pick up their box and head to another law enforcement office across the street. Instead, there should be a national database. We should be banning chokeholds and ensuring at every level that if a police officer commits a crime, that they are tried, and if they're guilty, they're convicted in the same way that anyone else would be. It's about balancing, ensuring that police officers are given the tools they need to fight violent crime, as well as ensuring our communities are protected from bad apples.
Thank you, Mr. Menefee.
Houston has seen ongoing concerns around violent crime and staffing shortages in local law enforcement. What specific federal funding or legislation would you support or oppose that directly impacts police staffing, crime prevention programs, or victim services in District 18? Ms. Edwards?
Well, as I mentioned previously, community policing has been a demonstrated model that works. When we need to make sure that we don't just talk about policies, but that we actually put our money where our mouth is and fund those policies. And so in the federal government, I will be supportive of sending down grant dollars to our localities so that they have the resources that they need in order to implement effective community policing. That means hiring enough law enforcement officers, training them properly, weeding out out those bad seeds before they even become officers with guns in their hands. And so we've got to get to the business of training, weeding people out, and of course, having enough resources to have the adequate amount of police officers in safe numbers in our community. In addition to that, there are community violence prevention intervention programs that I would also support. I have seen on the ground them work, haven't seen them work in situations in which there may be violent crime that has been created. Those individuals who may have a history in that community or not have the opportunity with a program like this to go in and de-escalate instead of having that retaliation, that next set of gunshots, that next round of people dying and losing their lives. You have individuals who are going in to those communities directly and intervening. Sometimes it may be at the funeral, sometimes it's at the hospital, but it's in spaces and places that really do prevent people from losing their lives needlessly. So programs such as those criminal intervention programs need to be funded at much higher levels, as well as a robust level of funding for community policing so that we have enough officers to keep all of our residents
10
safe
seconds.
and to be properly trained to serve and protect all residents.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Mr. Menefee, same question.
How many times have we seen a video of a shooting of an unarmed black man who was either having a mental health crisis or who was having to make a quick decision and found himself on the other side of a law enforcement officer's gun? In my opinion, we should do every single thing we can to take as many of the nonviolent cases away from law enforcement, whether it be mental health professional work or violence interrupters, and put them in the hands of professionals who are not law enforcement so that they can come and handle those issues directly. That's funding that I will fight for from the federal government. But I also think that we need better coordination amongst our law enforcement agencies. Most folks don't know that in Harris County alone, we have dozens of law enforcement agencies that work in silos in many instances and are not properly funded in a way that allows them to collaborate on a regular basis. I would support funding that ensures that those law enforcement agencies are collaborating or working in tandem, hand in hand every single day so that they're best equipped to solve violent crime. My number one goal for the police force is to deter and to solve violent crime, to be put in a position to ensure that your grandmother is protected when she's in the home by herself, to ensure that nobody is the victim of gun violence in our communities. But I do not believe that we should be deeply investing in ensuring that armed law enforcement officers are in our communities dealing with mental health issues when there are professionals who are better suited to do that. So in Congress, I will fight every single day for funding for mental health professionals and violence interrupters to take those types of cases away from law enforcement and to let them deal with violent crime.
Thank you, Mr. Menefee.
Our next topic is healthcare, women's health, and community well-being. Harris County faces one of the most severe maternal mortality crises in the nation, particularly among Black women. The community is demanding systemic change, accountability, and better support. What federal interventions will you fight for to reduce maternal mortality, and how will you ensure local healthcare systems are held accountable? Mrs. Edwards?
Unfortunately, this issue continues to plague our community, so much so that I was asked to serve on a steering committee to look at and explore what could be done here in our community regarding maternal deaths that were just taking place at alarming rates. Unfortunately, Harris County is home to the largest medical center in the world and one of the highest number of Black maternal deaths in the world as well, in the country, the country as well. We have to do something about it. One of the things that has to be done is funding the Momnibus bill that was initially authored by Congresswoman Lauren Underwood. In that bill, there are funding sources for a variety of measures and variables that can help reduce the disparities we're facing here in Harris County. But it does us no good to have that Momnibus bill if it's not fully funded. And that's what we need to be committed to doing. Our physicians need to be listening to their patients. You know, we have the example, for example, with Serena Williams having to literally herself say that she was having a blood clot for somebody to listen to her. And then, of course, how many people don't get that intervention and have to needlessly lose their lives? We've got to be in the business of elevating and improving health outcomes for every single person that lives in our community, no matter what their skin color, no matter what their gender, no matter what
30
their
seconds.
background. And right now, the job that needs to be done requires resources, and I will be supportive of increasing the resources available to the Omnibus Bill and bringing those dollars to Harris County and holding our healthcare providers accountable for improvement in this arena. We can't
10
just
seconds.
continue to have these disparities without improvement. And again, I will be making sure as the next Congresswoman for this district that improvement is in fact had.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Mr. Menefee, same question.
When my sister was giving birth to my niece, she called my wife for advice because when she was in the delivery room, doctors were trying to coerce her into an emergency C-section. And had she not had my wife there to be able to guide her through that, she may have went along with it. And when my wife was delivering our youngest son, she had complications and her blood pressure dropped tremendously when she was giving birth. And I saw her sitting there crying, wondering if she was going to make it out of the delivery room. How many women in our community have dealt with the same issue? How many husbands, how many fathers have had to look at their wife, a mom, go through the same exact thing? The sad fact is, in this country, if you're a Black woman and you go into the hospital to give birth, you have a higher likelihood of coming out with a lifelong ailment. You have a higher likelihood of not coming out at all. That's why in Congress, I want to invest in programs that address this issue. That means increasing perinatal training for the folks who work in these hospitals so that they understand the difference between dealing with a Black woman giving birth and a white woman giving birth. That means addressing social determinants of health, like housing, like nutrition, all of the things that go into how somebody's body reacts to the very traumatic experience of giving birth. And it means addressing postpartum issues. Right now in this country, postpartum care under Medicaid is only guaranteed for 60 days in state to state. But outside of that, it's up to the state to decide whether that postpartum health care is going to be extended for up to 12 months. Governor Abbott shouldn't decide whether Black women in this state have postpartum health care. When I go to Congress, I will fight tooth and nail to make sure that these are the types of laws that we're passing and to make sure that every single Black woman in our community can go to the hospital and give birth and have the confidence that they're going to be treated the exact same as anybody else who walks into that hospital.
Thank you, Mr. Menefee.
Residents struggle with long wait times, insurance gaps, unaffordable medications, and limited access to mental health and addiction services. Many feel the healthcare system is fundamentally broken. Do you support incremental reform or a full overhaul of the healthcare system? And what bold change are you willing to stand behind, even if it carries political risk? Ms. Edwards, we'll start with you.
I support an overhaul of our system, but first, of course, I think we have to start with the issues on the table with the Affordable Care Act. That includes increasing the subsidies that are being, extending the subsidies. That also includes expanding coverage. That also includes making sure that the type of coverage is what people need and the type of physicians are who people want. Right now, when the Affordable Care Act first got started and it got passed under the Obama administration, it was something that people did not expect to pass. And as a result of that, many lawsuits began to fly. There were challenges all the way to the Supreme Court level and made it radioactive in terms of a political hot topic in Congress and otherwise. So people left it alone. They didn't improve it the way it was supposed to. And we are now putting people's lives in jeopardy as a result. We've got to expand coverage. We've got to make sure that every single person in this country, no matter where they live, no matter what their background, whether they're an entrepreneur, whether they're in a W-2, have access to affordable health care that they deserve. As I mentioned to you earlier, this is personal to me. My father, I had to watch my dad go through his experience when I was 10 is when he got diagnosed, and he passed away when I was a teenager. And learning that system and how disconnected
30
it was
seconds.
from the needs of our community really showed me and shed light to the fact that there are people whose lives are hanging in the balance, and we've got to act now. So expanding coverage, making it affordable to everyone are the top priorities on my list.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Mr. Menefee, same question.
My older brother was 16 when he was diagnosed with leukemia. I was in elementary school still. And I can vividly remember being at hospital after hospital after hospital and meeting families and building a relationship with those families, only to learn that their child had passed away. That unlike my brother and unlike our family, they didn't have health care that would be able to take care of their expenses. My parents had TRICARE, governmental health care, issued directly by the government. And it covered my brother's chemo, it covered his radiation, it covered his prescriptions, and it covered the bone marrow transplant that saved his life. And throughout that entire process, our copays were exactly $0. That was government-sponsored healthcare. That's why I support, in this country, a full-scale reform of our healthcare system, ensuring that we have universal healthcare. That means that every single person in this country is guaranteed the right to see a doctor, is guaranteed the right to life-saving treatment, is guaranteed healthcare. And it's also going to ensure that people aren't going broke because of medical bills. In the last couple of years, every year, we see about 500,000 personal bankruptcies filed in this country. And many of them are filed because, or in part, because of medical debt. But you have other countries that have universal health care, like the UK, like Japan, like Canada. And in many of those countries, they have zero bankruptcies. And the reason is because right now in our country, the healthcare system is focused on only one thing, and that's profits for
30
these
seconds.
large corporations that bring in billions and billions of dollars on the backs of sick people. That is not how our system should run. We should be focused on patient outcomes. We should be focused on saving lives and not on making rich folks at healthcare companies more rich. If I go to Congress, I will support Medicare for all, and I don't care how politically risky it is. It's about saving lives, and that's what I'm dedicated to doing in Congress.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Menefee. And we are at the halftime point in this Texas 18 Congressional Runoff Debate. We're going to take a few minutes and break, and we'll be right back. All right. Thanks for joining us back, Houston. We are back with the Texas 18 Congressional District debate, and we're going to jump right back into it.
Thank you, Steve. For years, undeserved neighborhoods have battled illegal dumping, trash debris, and waste that undermine public health and community pride. Enforcement and cleanup tools often fall short. How will you use federal authority and funding to combat illegal dumping and restore dignity to long neglected neighborhoods?
Ms. Edwards?
This has been a very pervasive issue for many residents of the 18th Congressional District, whether you're talking about Acres Homes or all of Northeast Houston even. We've even seen a situation in which Department of Justice has been involved in exploring what was happening in our community. The issue is simple. We need to provide federal funding to then provide more dollars for enforcement and also surveillance. While I was on city council, I remember how excited council members were who were district city council members to get their budgets for surveillance cameras so that they could, in fact, surveil and make sure that they knew where the illegal dumping was occurring. The problem is this. There is a disrespect of our communities and the disparate outcomes in our communities, meaning communities of color, particularly those that are lower socioeconomic status, is outrageous. We have got to fight back. Part of that is to provide federal dollars to our local cities so that they can truly surveil and then, of course, prevent this illegal dumping from occurring. It doesn't just touch upon the dignity of the community that is hampered, but it also touches upon a healthcare issue. It's a public health issue in our community when you have illegal dumping and you have disease and rodents and other forms of infestation that take place because someone has decided to use your neighborhood as a trash can. We can do better than this in our community, and it starts with us putting our money where our mouth is. And that is one of the things, as your next Congresswoman, I will be ready to do on day one, having been someone who has gotten down federal resources and, of course, bringing public dollars to public projects as a public finance attorney as well. I look forward to working with the community so that no one has to deal with illegal dumping again.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Mr. Menefee?
There are parts of town right now where if you walk through them or drive through them, you see tires, you see couches, you see dressers, all right there outside on the side of the street, impeding folks' ability to walk, and eventually it becomes an environmental justice issue. Not a single one of those neighborhoods is a high-income white neighborhood. You see this out in Sunnyside, you see it out in Fifth Ward, you see it in Acres Home, you see it in these other neighborhoods. You will not see a single one in Westview. You won't see a single illegal dumping site in River Oaks. This is an issue of racial justice. And the job of a congressman is to bring the money here to ensure that this is handled at the local level. Look, the city, the county, these folks are at the lowest level of government, closest to your doorstep. They're going to be best empowered to be able to do something about it. You have to change the laws right now to allow the county to be able to take real enforcement measures on illegal dumping. But it's also going to be something where you have to work hand in hand with the city to get it done. But you're also going to need a member of Congress who's prepared to have that fight in Washington, D.C. so that the money can get here in the first place. When I was serving as the Harris County Attorney, I served on the EPA's Local Government Advisory Committee. This is a national committee under President Biden working directly with the head of the Environmental Protection Agency at the time, a young brother, young black dude who had come down to our communities and had seen our problems. Since Donald Trump took over the White House, he has cut the EPA's budget by nearly 50%. The Environmental Justice Office in the EPA has been completely abolished. Those are funds that are supposed to be coming to our communities to best position us to deal with these types of issues. When I go to Congress, I'll be focused on bringing the money here to help so that we can enforce illegal dumping locally. But I also am going to have every single fight I can with the White House to make them fully fund the EPA so that we can get the money here in the first place.
Thank you, Mr. Menefee.
Flooding remains one of the district's defining challenges, such as aging drainage systems and long-standing inequities for resilience funding. If you could secure one major federal infrastructure win for Texas 18, what would it be, and which agencies or partners would you bring together to deliver it? Mr. Menefee, we're going to start with you this time.
The win that I would bring is to get dollars directly allocated to local government to be able to put people in a better position to be successful after the storm hits. And I've done that exact thing as the Harris County Attorney. After Hurricane Harvey, we saw devastation throughout our communities, and Houston was hit more hard than many other places throughout this state. But despite the fact that the Gulf Coast was hit so very hard by that storm, there was over $1 billion that was allocated in funding to come to mitigate the issues, and $0 of that more than $1 billion was allocated to the Houston and Harris County governments. I was part of the team of folks who fought to get that zero up to $750 million to address the issues that came from Hurricane Harvey. But it's not enough. We need that money to be directly allocated to local governments. Greg Abbott should not be a pass-through for funds that are designed to help people when they're dealing with a hurricane or a storm. But we also need rapid rehousing programs. So many folks, when these storms hit, they lose their property, they lose their housing, and they're stuck in a situation where they have no place to go. It should be moving as quickly as possible through FEMA, through the federal government, to ensure that those folks get money in their pockets so that they can get into housing. And let's be clear, every single person out there has a trauma story from flooding that has happened in our communities. A good friend of mine from college, his high school sweetheart, who he had dated for years and years and years, through a storm, was unable to get out of her vehicle
30 seconds.
And ultimately drowned in her car. How many folks throughout our communities have a similar story, know somebody who has a similar story? There's a trauma that's associated with coming up in the Gulf Coast. Our government should be helping our communities, not adding to that trauma. I will do every single thing I can to save FEMA. I'll do every single thing I can to get dollars directly allocated to our local government and to make sure that people are in housing quickly after the storm hits.
Thank you, Mr. Menefee. Ms. Edwards, same question.
8 years ago, 51 inches of rainfall came across our community, known as Harvey. And I was an at-large Houston City Council member who was on the front lines in addressing the needs of our community. I know what it feels like to fly up and down to DC and secure the direct allocation of funding that we were able to receive for housing repair needs. I know what it means to go into the houses of those that are victims of the storm and yet victimized by a system that does not work for them. There was a woman by the name of Miss Moore whose home, whose floor I almost fell through the floor of, and yet and still FEMA denied her arbitrarily of the support that she needed. And that, my friends, is wrong. It wasn't until I had a New York Times article written about her case that she then received her support and funding. I have seen senior and senior after senior who has been vulnerable and yet denied arbitrarily the access to resources that they need. I've also seen our government fail people when it comes to having policies in place on time. So in addition to having direct allocation of funding, we've got to fix and overhaul our disaster recovery system in our country. It is failing everyone. Whether or not somebody's going to buy out a street should be known before you spend your life savings on that house. Whether or not this is going to be an opportunity for you to elevate your home should be known before you make those key decisions. And so we've got to make sure that we streamline this process so that the resources are where they need to be, when they need to be there, and that people are properly trained so that we are now equitably making sure that our communities can get back on their feet. It should not take a New York Times article to have disaster recovery work for someone.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards.
Our next topic is housing displacement and neighborhood stability. Homelessness in the Houston area has become more visible with encampments near freeways, bayous, and commercial corridors. Solutions require coordination between federal, city, and county partners. How will you leverage federal policy to reduce street homelessness and ensure mental health, addiction treatment, and housing resources work together rather than in silos? Mr. Menefee, we're going to start with you.
The unhoused population have been treated so poorly in our region. We've seen so many folks who are battling substance abuse, who are battling instability, find themselves in a situation where they're unhoused, only to have their government criminalize their circumstance. I don't believe that government should be in the business of criminalizing folks just for being unhoused. And the good news is we've seen right here in the Houston region how we can do this the right way. Under the leadership of our former mayor, Sylvester Turner, there was a coalition of folks who were working together. This was nonprofits, this was the city, it was the county, working hand in hand so that folks had a collaborative effort that directed people to resources immediately. Instead of an unhoused person going to place number one and being told they needed to go to place number two to get the help that they needed, everybody was working in tandem so that we could shorten timelines and folks could find themselves in temporary and eventually permanent housing. That's the type of system we need to return to. That's the type of system that caused mayors from other large cities throughout the country to come to Houston to say, how did you do this? My role as a member of Congress will be a connector to work hand in hand with the city, with the county, with the nonprofit systems to ensure that everybody is working collectively, collaboratively to help solve this issue. But it's also about bringing the dollars down so that folks can have mental health treatment and funding for temporary and permanent housing. My number one goal is to ensure that we do not criminalize the unhoused population in our city and our county. And the way that we protect against that is by providing them the housing that they need. It's going to take federal dollars to get us there, and I am committed to bringing that money down to make that happen.
Thank you, Mr. Menefee. Ms. Edwards, same question.
I was serving on city council when we had our Housing First model, and it was something that, of course, was unique to Houston and something that we ought to make sure that is fully funded and supported. In addition, I want to highlight a few features of what makes a program like that successful. Having the dollars needed so that you can have effective what's called sweep teams that go into the unhoused communities and spaces and talk to people about comprehensive solutions to the complicated problems that they face, whether it's mental health, whether it's addiction, or a combination of things. things. We need to continue to support those sweep teams and nonprofit organizations that do that vital work. In addition to that, when I did the Harvey recovery work, what I learned was that we have a disjointed system of housing support in our city. One in which we don't have a comprehensive housing plan, one in which we don't have the resources that people need to repair their homes and to be stable with their housing. And so with that said, I believe that we need to create what will be called the Housing Solution Centers. And that will be a way to help residents navigate towards housing solutions rather than their series of rejections that they're seeing today. Right now, and too often, we see the federal, state, and local government programs concerning housing
30 seconds.
be isolated and work in silos. We have to break down those silos, provide the case management that is needed so that people know how to navigate to the housing solutions that they need. Some folks are just one step away from being unhoused, and we need to be proactive about making sure that they have the resources and the case management services that will get them towards their solutions.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards.
All right, this country continues to wrestle with border security, asylum processing, and strained local resources. Many believe that true reform will require bipartisan compromise. What immigration compromise would you support that provides stability at the border while protecting the families and employers of Texas 18? Mr. Menefee, we'll start with you.
Immigration is an issue that has impacted so many people throughout our communities, with Houston having such a large population of vibrant immigrants who contribute to our society. I think our number one focus needs to be to humanize these voices to make sure that they're not demonized in our communities. I think of a close family member I have who, during the course of this campaign, was driving home one day and found himself the victim of a road rage incident. A group of guys followed him home, got out the car, beat him to a pulp. He wouldn't go to the hospital and he wouldn't call the police because he was worried that an ICE agent would come and potentially deport him. Right now, we see that Donald Trump has let mass ICE agents loose in our schools and our places of worship and Home Depot parking lots. And of course, just last week, we saw that a mother of 3, after dropping off her kid, was shot in the face and murdered by an ICE agent. Any steps to fixing our immigration system in this country has to deal with the fact that Donald Trump has radicalized ICE and the immigration processes in this country. But I believe that we should have a pathway to citizenship for not just dreamers and young people, but folks who have been in this country for a long period of time and who haven't gotten into any trouble. We have to fix our asylum processes to ensure that they're fully funded, because right now you can file an asylum application and not get an answer for years and years and years. And we have to ensure that mixed status families are protected so that folks are not seeing a loved one deported to a foreign land that they haven't lived in a long time. So a compromise I'm willing to make is, if you are an undocumented immigrant in this country and you shoot and kill somebody, you commit a violent crime, I believe that folks should be deported. We need to enforce our border and ensure that our immigration laws are enforced. But for the folks who are here pouring into our economy, who are good members of our community, good neighbors, they should be given a pathway to citizenship, and members of Congress should be thoughtful in trying to make that happen.
Thank you, Mr. Menefee. Ms. Edwards, same question.
The issue of immigration has become a hot topic that is one in which we have seen the abuse of power in a way that has become unimaginable. The abuse of ICE, killing U.S. citizens, terrorizing communities, regardless of your status in this country, is unacceptable. We have got to get out of the business of this highly politicized and toxic immigration tone that the president has set and get into the business of being serious policymakers. That means we need to have comprehensive immigration reform. And I will say that once more. Comprehensive immigration reform. We have heard those terms many times over, many debate stages, but yet we are not seeing the changes necessary. Of course, we want to have secure borders, but we do need to have opportunities for people who have worked here, contributed here, and lived here for prolonged periods of time to have pathways to citizenship. You know, we should not be in the business, particularly in a city like ours, Houston, which is home to where I believe 142 languages are spoken here. That diversity, that immigration spirit, that's the underpinning of what makes our community so great. So to destroy, to terrorize, to attack those individuals is wrong. And we need to make sure we create pathways for citizenship. We need to go back and look at these
30
quotas
seconds.
that create these long lines to begin with. And then in addition to that, we need to make sure that we come to a space and place where our enforcement arm like ICE is not abusing its power in the way that it is. We cannot continue to terrorize members of our own community and expect that our country will continue to thrive in that way.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. All right, so now we move to the segment where we ask the candidates to ask each other one direct question. Ms. Edwards, please begin by asking your question of any topic in particular that you would like to ask Mr. Menefee. He will get the chance to respond. And then Mr. Menefee, vice versa, you will then ask Ms. Edwards a question. So, Ms. Edwards?
So I think I'll ask about voter turnout. We see that the 18th Congressional District has historically had very low voter turnout, and that has been something, unfortunately, that has continued to persist. What ideas, what solutions do you have to offer to make that something of the past, irrespective of the outcome of this race?
I think it's important that to turn out voters, you got to work your district at all points in time. And we have to have public servants who are committed to getting other folks elected and not just themselves. I got into politics at 2016. And since that time, I have worked as hard as I can to get folks who see the world the same way as I do elected across the state of Texas. Whether it was campaigning out in Dallas with Jasmine Crockett when she first decided to run for Congress, or campaigning in Fort Bend with our young dynamic county commissioner, Dexter McCoy, when he announced his campaign, but trying to find opportunities to engage people. But we know that here in the 18th Congressional District, we are incredibly gerrymandered. That means that right now we're a Democratic 70% district, and after redistricting, we'll be an 80% Democratic district. So many times folks may find themselves in a situation where they win their primary election, the Democratic election, and after that, they're no longer running anymore. They're not talking to voters, they're not engaging people. What I will commit to is engaging people throughout the year. That means having town halls on a regular basis. That means making sure that residents are fully informed about what's going on in our country. And it means publicly advertising to folks. There's an election going on in November. Your vote is incredibly important. You're going to have a race for U.S. Senate that you need to vote on to ensure that somebody gets in office who's going to protect us. There's a mayor's race coming up. You need to stay engaged. So the same way that I've been engaged in ensuring that folks are working to get elected since the first time that I've gotten office, I will continue to do so regardless of whether I'm successful in this campaign.
Thank you. Mr. Menefee, you may now ask your question to Ms. Edwards.
Here in this country, and particularly in the city, we have a fantastic population of folks who are from various countries in Africa and the Caribbean. I spent part of my time in high school in Southwest Houston, which is the second largest population of Nigerians of anywhere in the country. There was a lot of eating suya, eating fufu, and they were great neighbors. They created jobs for people. They taught us about their culture and the things that they stood for, and they ultimately make our city better. Have you found in your experience in this wonderful melting pot of a city that you have built relationships like that with folks in the African and Caribbean communities as well?
100%. I think you hit the nail on the head that Houston, we're very lucky, I think, to be in a city and a community that has such a robust fabric of people from the African diaspora and people in the Caribbean. And not only do we have the opportunity to engage in their culture, but I think the relationships have to be built as well. I think our Congresswoman, Sheila Jackson Lee, and Congressman Turner did a really remarkable job of facilitating and having real relationships within those communities. And I think the next leader of this 18th Congressional District has to do the same. You know, it does you no good when you hear people talk about things like diversity and equity and inclusion just to have a display of culture. I don't think that's far enough. I think we have to embrace and include into our thought processes and also into the work that we do in terms of the way that we move, the cultures that make up our community. So we're very fortunate to be a home to, as I mentioned, a home to where 142 different languages are spoken here, and we get a chance to really work collaboratively with a wonderful array of populations, including those from the Caribbean and Africa. I will say this too, while I was serving on city council, I had the opportunity to help host and help to engage and welcome and engage on issues, various countries' issues in terms of the economic issues that they were experiencing that they wanted to be addressed. And so it doesn't just, you know, start and end with celebratory events. It's got to be a real relationship that you forge. And I had the great fortune before I walked in here today to eat a little bit of jollof rice. So I was getting a chance to engage. I think this is our first forum, our first debate that has had jollof rice. So, and I'm a big fan, so I love it. So again, it's important to really make those relationships stick and to really lift each other up, because that's all we have is each other.
Thank you both. We are now at closing statements. Each candidate will have 3 minutes. Mr. Menefee, you will go first, followed by Ms. Edwards.
I'm Christian Menefee, and it's been the honor of my life to serve as the Harris County Attorney. And I'm so excited for the opportunity to serve the public in Congress in the 18th Congressional District. Across this district, when I go and talk to people at their doorstep, I keep hearing the same thing over and over and over. I went and knocked the door of an 80-year-old African-American woman, and as we were talking, I expected her to bring up how Social Security is underfunded in this country, or how Medicare access is not what it should be. And she looked at me and said, "Young man, what are you going to do about Donald Trump?" Right now, we have a president in our country who is stripping the very fabric of what it means to be an American. They're telling folks who for generations have been deemed Americans in this country that they no longer have access to citizenship. He's targeting community after community, cutting trillions of dollars in federal funding that is supposed to come and directly benefit our communities. Cutting SNAP benefits, despite the fact that the 18th Congressional District has the largest concentration of SNAP recipients of any district in the state of Texas. So I make no qualms about the fact that I am going to Congress to stand up to Donald Trump and to protect each and every one of our communities as best I can, because he is directly targeting them. But I also want the 18th Congressional District to be one of the best places to live and raise a family in all of the state of Texas. And that means ensuring that our minimum wage is increased, ensuring that we don't have kids who are walking in the street to a corner store because there's no sidewalks and there's no grocery stores, but instead bringing federal funding down for beautification so that we have sidewalks, and to put an end to the food deserts that are in so many of our communities. The good news is I've done this exact work as Harris County Attorney. I have fought for our communities tirelessly, and I haven't just fought cosmetically for cosmetic reasons, but I have fought and won. I have fought to protect healthcare programs when Donald Trump tried to cut them, and won. I have fought to protect our voting rights time and time again, and won to ensure that every single person in Harris County is able to cast their ballot. I'm going to Congress to do the exact same thing. Not to go along to get along, not to hang out, not to go to galas, not to go to luncheons, but to get a job done for the people of the 18th Congressional District. You send me to Congress, and I will work tirelessly, day in and day out, to make sure that every single person in our community is in a position to have their fair shot at the American dream, and to ensure that as a member of Congress, I am fighting like hell to make that happen. I'm Christian Menefee. I'm so grateful for the conversation tonight, and I'm asking for your support and for your vote for Congress in the 18th Congressional District.
Go ahead, Ms. Edwards, your closing statement.
8 years ago, when Harvey hit our community, I learned that so many of our residents were not getting the help that they needed. They were cleaning up the floors, but they were not removing the walls that had been soiled by the floodwaters. So I decided that I would roll up my sleeves and go door to door, and we did that. We checked on hundreds of seniors. We went door to door. We mobilized hundreds of volunteers. And do you know, when I would knock on those doorsteps, knock on those front doors, the first thing they would say when I would step foot on the doorstep is, "What are you doing here?" And I would say, "Well, I'm your city council member. I'm here to help." Then they'd look at me and say, but wait a minute, are you up for re-election already? And that question, in the face of the second worst disaster in United States history, was telling. It represented that a democracy existed that did not work well for people, because we have now conditioned people to believe that the only time we show up in your neighborhood, the only time we'll be on your doorstep, the only time we'll know your name or your issues is when we need something from you, as opposed to be there to make the deposits in your life that your community needs. I have a track record of being the person who has delivered the results when it was not campaign season, when I was going in the community, when the cameras went away, and rebuilding housing, creating job opportunities for people who needed the help the most, helping people navigate their small business concerns. I have a deep, long track record, and it's going to be the person who can convince people that it does matter whether or not you vote or not, as to what to increase the turnout necessary so that we can improve our outcomes for our community. You see, when we saw the presidential election last year, or in 2024, we saw that we had a voting problem. Millions of people stayed at home who should have been out to vote because many of them believed that it didn't matter one way or the other. That's why it's imperative that you put people in office who have the track record, who can demonstrate that it does matter, and who has the experience necessary to get it done on day one. I have been a public finance attorney and bringing home resources to public projects. I have been a city council member and brought home billions directly to our community in Houston. I have also created policy. I have also been someone who has advocated on the behalf of our residents and had real wins and outcomes when it comes to child health care clinics in our schools as well. We need somebody who's battle tested, somebody who's going to work alongside the community for the community and be directly accountable to the community. You see, I have the most important endorsements of all in this race, and that is the endorsement of the people of the community that I seek to serve. And that is what I will continue to hold on to and who I will be accountable to as the next Congresswoman for this 18th Congressional District.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards.
All right. And on behalf of Afrovibes TV and Radio Station, we thank our candidates, our production team, and our viewers watching on Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, the Afrovibes TV app, Afrovibes.tv, and on YouTube. Your vote is your voice. Early voting is underway and Election Day is fast approaching. I'm Steve Okoroha with my co-host, Justice Ojo. Thank you for joining us and good night.